And my name is Teresa Kittredge with 100 Row Women. I want to thank folks for joining this morning. We really, I was just sharing with Cheniqua prior to this, 100 Row Women is put together this series because we really heard from people that they wanted to, they really wanted to have all kinds of mentorship. And one piece of mentorship was sort of the story sharing piece. And really being able to connect with women in small, more intimate gatherings to talk about, gosh, what is your leadership story and how did you navigate your leadership? And we really have been trying to get a wide variety of women to participate, and it's been really fun. And I was just also sharing that it's a very selfish for me because I just get to learn so much about these incredible women that we're able to host. So 100 Row Women is all about making connections and inspiring leadership and figured out how do we better support each other as rural women. So we have a variety of programming that we'd love to have you involved in, and we'll share links on that later. But I really want to get right to the meat of it today and introduce Cheniqua Johnson. And I'm connected with Cheniqua a couple of years ago when 100 Row Women was just getting up and going. And I've watched her from afar as she's done different things over the last couple of years and taken on some incredible leadership roles. And we do share something in common. I was born in Worthington, but I've been gone from Worthington for a long time. But I have a very special place in my heart for Worthington, Minnesota. And I mean, it's our most international city. And of course, we always still have struggles, but the community is, it's coming together and coming forward. And I know it's still a lot of work, but I just have a special place in my heart for Worthington. So, I'm not going to do a big introduction, Cheniqua, because that's what we're going to have you do, is really tell us about yourself, tell us your leadership story. And again, thank you for taking the time to do this with us today. I know it's a crazy world out there right now, and it's going to be nice to just take a break and hear from an amazing young woman like you. So I am just going to turn it over to you to tell us about yourself and tell us about your story and tell us how you've navigated life. So welcome, and I'm handing it over to you, Cheniqua.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you all for coming today and just taking some time out to talk with me. A couple things right off the jump. I am a very interactive person. So when I do these Zoom calls, I know sometimes people will listen, and I know that you're here just to hear me talk, but I am not here to hear me talk. I would love to talk with you guys and really hear any questions that you guys have at any time. So I'll give a little bit of my story, but I just want to open that up. It doesn't have to be super formal, and feel free to ask questions, and I'll kind of keep track throughout as well, just to incorporate them into what we're saying, because I appreciate you guys being on camera as well. So as if you have to go off camera, it's not a problem with me, but I really appreciate the interaction too. So it just doesn't feel like you're talking to a funnel. But I'm Cheniqua, and I work at the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation right now. I'm a relationship manager. I handle the health and civic engagement grants right now, which is essentially I work with nonprofits across the state of Minnesota, because the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation also works with the F.R. Bigelow Foundation and the Martyr Foundation, which allow us to fund different nonprofits across the state. That's what I do in my work title space, but I grew up in Worthington, Minnesota. I was born and raised there, went to high school there. My brother and I are both from there. And so I have a lot of love from my Worthington folks. So Zadi, while you're the only man here, I'm glad that you're here. But also in general, I am really currently maneuvering the space of both, I have a lot of care around the state, both in greater Minnesota and in the urban metropolitan area. I have friends and family that I consider family in both areas, and have really had the privilege of being in two places for at least maybe three, sometimes with the pandemic 4 or 5. But over the last few years have kind of dabbled a little bit in politics. I've worked for both the Attorney General when he was in Congress. His last year in Congress, I was at his district office in North Minneapolis. I have served with the aviation subcommittee at the House of Representatives. And so prior to the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation, actually was in Virginia and in Washington, DC for a year, a year and a half until the pandemic hit. I've done some organizing, both electoral as well as just community issue area organizing in Worthington, in St. Paul, and in Minneapolis. And so growing up, really, I was I have a father, a mother, and an older brother. So I was the youngest in our family, but I also had an intergenerational family. So I always tell folks, like, my family, between the four of us, there were so many different years of knowledge. My father was 94 when he passed away in 2016. And so really just in general, I had the privilege of being raised by a man who was retired and was a stay-at-home dad. My mom worked full-time as a nurse. And so we didn't do gender roles. And kind of growing up in that space, like, I learned a lot about both what it meant to be from Worthington and what it was like. I had a lot of different student organizations, but never really tapped into anything political. Like, I genuinely was like speech, which in retrospect now I'm just like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But I was a huge music person, loved theater. I was in band, choir, and we had like 18 different student groups in high school. And I think I was a part of 14. I really did like a little bit of everything because I just wanted to stay busy. My family really instilled in me education was super important. And I think that has carried me over the years. When I graduated from high school in 2013, I went to the University of Minnesota right after graduation and got a bachelor's degree in family social science. And part of that journey was really learning more about me, I think, as a young professional. I worked at the Hubert Humphrey School my freshman year and didn't know anything about like Hubert Humphrey, didn't know who Roy Wilkins was. I worked at the Roy Wilkins Center. I didn't, I was like, research assistant, I can do that. I can do research. I don't know much about anything else. And so getting into the center and, learning what it meant to say disparity, because I never really said that growing up or knew what that was or what it meant to talk about or identify areas where there were inequities or racial disparities, things like that were new concepts to me because I hadn't necessarily always talked about it. I definitely didn't, I didn't introduce myself probably in high school, like my name's Cheniqua, here's all the things that I'm doing, but really never fully like grasped like, oh, and I'm African-American, my father's Native American, like all of these different areas of me and what it meant kind of like to diversify my introduction. And so in college, a lot of my experience was around discovering that identity. I joined the Black Student Union my freshman year, along with many other organizations, because as a college student, I wanted one of two things, free food and not to oversleep past my 8 a.m. class. And so I joined a lot of student organizations and learned more about their different cultures. It was, I spent a lot of time on the second floor of Kauffman Memorial Union, which if you didn't go to the U, it's like a student organization floor that has a lot of different, it's kind of like the housing or hosting space for places like Black Student Union, La Raza, which is like the Latino student organization, the student government associations on the second floor, and really just talking to people. I knew absolutely no one when I went to the U. And in fact, that's kind of why I picked it. In a small space, in a small town, people knew, I lived there for years. My mother had lived there for years. My dad had lived there for 30 years. Like everyone kind of knew or, knew me or knew of my family because we were just, we kind of represented we grew up there. That was there, retired there space. And so going to the University of Minnesota was definitely a culture shock in the essence, but like a welcomed culture shock, just because it was new people, new spaces. But again, that going back to learning how to introduce myself, because I really didn't have to do that as much growing up. If it was introducing myself, it was usually saying my name because people would be like, oh, that's Willie's daughter, which is my dad, or like, oh, that's, Dee Dee's daughter, my mom. And so that was part of my undergrad journey in space. I tapped into politics a lot based off of just, I think, proximity as well. If you would have asked the younger me if I would end up running for office or like getting involved in elections or organizing political campaigns, I probably would have said, I don't even know what you're talking about. But my sophomore year, transitioned from the Humphrey School and interned with Senator Franken during the summer, and really got my first glimpse at all of like federal government. I never really, I didn't watch Fox or CNN or news or anything like that. It didn't matter which one. I was like really learning more about the process and what it meant to be working or interning in a senator's office. And it kind of took off from there, went straight into campaign organizing afterwards, took a semester off. Actually, after the presidential election, went to DC for a few months and interned with Senator Durbin, and attended Marquette University as a student exchange. And so part of the TRIO program was really learning about taking first generation college students, because I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and helping us learn. And I felt like that was kind of has basically shaped my journey, because I learned a lot about myself, but I learned a lot about things that I had never thought about before. And so now I'm like in these spaces where people can, where I can graduate from undergrad in 2017 and file for office 2 months later when I'm walking through to run for state representative in Southwest Minnesota. And a part of my space and my time has always been to continue to push the needle a little bit, even if it's not just like complete utter change. I joined these spaces like in philanthropy and like in politics and government, in spaces sometimes where it doesn't feel like a lot of things are getting done, just to learn more about the individual person, kind of humanize it a little bit, and then also do things like running for office so that way we can show other people, much similar to you, Teresa, in this conversation, like kind of creating a pipeline for people to start to see themselves in these spaces. One thing that I openly share with people is like, I'm 26, I'll be 27 next month. And that also means that in all of these different things and all these different spaces and experiences, I am still young and still learning, and definitely don't know it all. And so it's been really cool. It's been a great honor to, both maneuver so many different political spaces, but then to transition as well into philanthropy. Because sometimes it feels, as a young person, for me, it feels sometimes like you have to pick one thing and stick to that one thing and like do it well. And I feel like so many people are just like, Cheniqua, I don't know what you're doing. You're doing all these different things. Like, and I'm just like, that's part of my identity too. There's so many things. I founded a brunch series this past year that brings together women and women of color in the Twin Cities. And it's, people come from like all over the state, but like really, truly, we're gathering 200 women in June next weekend at the Science Museum of Minnesota in St. Paul. And so many people come to the Science Museum, but like it was really important for us to pick that location because we want to bring more women and more moms and more family members to the Science Museum. And if the first time they've been to the Science Museum is at our event, great. And so things like that, where you're like, you're not pigeonholed. You're definitely not pigeonholed by your degree. You're not pigeonholed by your experience. And in many ways, you can kind of turn it into whatever you'd like. But I told myself I'd stop talking after 10 minutes. So Teresa, I'll also turn it back. Just like, I really welcome the questions. But that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.